Hello, I'm Andrew Pritchard, and thank you for watching today's Corn Belt Regional Forecast, brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, over the last 48 hours, we watched that frontal boundary that's brought relief to the Corn Belt slowly sink south across the region, with isolated and scattered showers and storms developing along it. Several corridors of heavier precipitation here from the Central Plains across parts of Nebraska into Missouri, where we saw a rather large cluster of thunderstorms, and then some severe weather across parts of the Northeast region. When we talk about the Corn Belt, certainly not everyone benefiting from that rain over the last couple of days. We've got some noticeable dry spots showing up here across parts of Iowa and Illinois. Scattered dry spots as you look across the eastern Corn Belt here, and then more isolated dry spots if you look across the upper Midwest. And of course, Kansas certainly quite dry over the last 14 days or so. With the ridge of heat, or the ridge of high pressure across the Corn Belt here, with that week of really intense heat across the Corn Belt, some folks going through that without any really noticeable precipitation over the last couple of weeks. And we check in with the hazards map here from the National Weather Service on the morning of Tuesday the 23rd, a much different picture than we looked at on Friday morning, where we had excessive heat warnings and heat advisories across a huge chunk of the Corn Belt. We are all clear, though, as we look at this thing on Tuesday morning. Just some flood advisories in here from some of the recent flooding events. So we look at a snapshot here for the next 7 to 10 days here. We're looking at the precipitation forecast from the GFS ensemble model right now. Week 1 on the left, week 2 on the right. Of course, with this pattern here, with this ridge of high pressure across the central part of the United States, going to be much drier as we look out over the next week or so. Some opportunities for precipitation across parts of the Dakotas into the upper Midwest, which we'll talk about here in a moment. When we look at week 2 here, July 30th through August 5th, we're going to be bringing in some chances for precipitation here across the Corn Belt again as we talk about getting into early next week, and we will cover that here in the end of this video as well. Looking at the temperature anomalies for the first 5 days on the left, and then the 6 to 10 days on the right here. Of course, this much cooler, much less humid air mass dominating over the next 5 days or so. Now, this is a bit misleading over here on the right. We will start to build some heat back into this region. We'll talk about that as well as we get into next week. Looking at the current setup right now on Tuesday morning, here is this ridge of high pressure that's brought in this cooler and much less humid air mass to the Corn Belt. We've got an area of low pressure that's going to be intensifying, though, over the Canadian Prairie. So when we jump out to Thursday morning, here's what that surface map looks like. We've got this strong area of low pressure across the Canadian Prairies. We'll have a front hanging off to the south there, and that's going to be bringing those rain chances to the Dakotas and parts of the upper Midwest as we get into Thursday and Friday, as this area of high pressure begins to slide off to the east. As we look first at the high resolution rapid refresh model, there we go, taking us out over the next day and a half here, you're going to see this area, this high pressure with thunderstorms developing around that off to the Intermountain West. You're also going to see a couple of isolated showers popping up here across parts of Wisconsin and Illinois, and that's due to very steep lapse rates here in this new air mass. It's a much less humid air mass, but it's one that the much less humid air with the July sun, it does heat up rapidly, and we get these steep lapse rates. That leads to a lot of vertical motion. You'll see that in the form of those puffy cumulus clouds, but there is the chance here that across parts of Wisconsin and Illinois, maybe a couple very light showers popping up. You see them right there as we go through Tuesday afternoon and Tuesday evening, and then here's the thunderstorm activity off to the west. But look at the dew points here. We've got a very different air mass across this region. So where you saw those showers popping up, we've got dew points in the 50s to maybe 60 degrees across this region. And that is one, again, that supports that strong vertical motion, those cumulus clouds. And perhaps, again, maybe forcing out a couple of showers, but this is not the kind of air mass that supports those heavy torrential downpours, those tropical downpours of the summer. So any precipitation in this area, Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening, going to be very light and very isolated in nature. If we look a little bit further out, looking at the high-resolution NAM model, we're going to be able to see the same thing, maybe these light showers popping up here Tuesday afternoon and Tuesday evening. But as we play this out a little bit further into the mid to late part of the week, you're going to start to see some of the shower and thunderstorm activity increasing across the Dakotas and the upper Midwest. So here we go. We'll go ahead and play this. We'll go ahead and we'll just step through time with it, though, so we can kind of point out some of the details. We'll go through Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening. Here are those very light showers across parts of Wisconsin, parts of northern Illinois. As we head now into Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening, this is when we're starting to see some of the first showers and storms emerging here from this cold front across parts of the Dakotas, trailing off from the south across the Canadian prairies where that area of low pressure sits. We'll take this out into Thursday night and then into Thursday morning. We're seeing some of that shower activity begin to die out across the Dakotas. But this front will continue then on across parts of the upper Midwest, bringing thunderstorm chances to parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, maybe far northern Illinois as we get into the weekend. Total precipitation from the high-resolution NAM model, this takes us out again to Thursday morning, seeing these very scattered showers and thunderstorm activity here getting into Wednesday afternoon and then into Thursday morning across the Dakotas. This is the forecast precipitation being spit out here from those Tuesday afternoon and evening isolated showers, but I think that looks a little bit worse than we'll actually see. This is a very dry pattern across a big chunk of the central United States. Now, where are we headed, though, from here? We do have some changes going on. So here's the ridge axis right now over the western United States. We've got this trough across the east, and that is what has kept us cooler now across the central United States. We're going to begin to play this out, though, and we'll go ahead and see what happens here over the next 7 to 10 days. We'll go ahead and bring it back. As we head through the middle part of this week, here is that trough now that's bringing the showers and storms to parts of the Dakotas here Wednesday and Thursday, bringing more significant precipitation to the Canadian prairies. This slides over the top of that, again, with the cold front dragging off across parts of the upper Midwest as we get into the later part of the week. Quieting down then for the weekend, and then we've got another system that's going to be coming through here during the back half of the weekend into early next week. And this may bring more significant storm chances to parts of the Dakotas and then getting into parts of the Midwest as we get into, again, early next week. Beyond that, the ridge really starts to build back into the central United States, and that's where we begin to pivot back towards what may be a hotter pattern across at least a portion of the Corn Belt as we talk about the first few days of August. Now, I'm a severe weather guy, so I like to look at this to kind of look at what's happening with our air mass across the Corn Belt. We're looking at convective available potential energy. Again, that's the instability, the fuel that drives these thunderstorms. It's a way of looking at kind of the warm and muggy air mass across the region, broadly speaking. If we look at this right now, Tuesday morning, again, very stable across a big chunk of the Corn Belt. That's because we're cooler, much less humid. It doesn't feel like a thunderstorm day out there. If you head out across the eastern Corn Belt, certainly walking out the door here in Champaign, Illinois early this morning, it's chilly out there compared to the last week or so. But let's play this out as we head into the middle part of the late part of the week into early next week, I should say. And we've got some changes going on. You see it first starting here across the Gulf Coast. You see it starting to kind of pump up here as we get into the mid to late part of the week. But then by the time this loop ends, we'll see if I can go ahead and we'll just pause it here when we get to the end of the loop. So here we go. We'll bring it back. Very stable across the region here early to mid this week. Let's look just for example here as we go back to Wednesday evening. Look at the instability forecast here across Wisconsin and Illinois that's driving some of those showers. As we talk about Tuesday afternoon and evening. Again, not anything close to the top level of the chart here, which is what we look to for the chance for significant thunderstorms at this time of year. But let's go ahead. We'll bring this out. Here is the frontal boundary that's moving across the Dakotas here late this week, bringing the chance for some showers and storms. As we get into the weekend, though, this is where you see it starting to pump back up from the Gulf of Mexico, starting to get that return flow. Of course, we don't need all of that to come from the Gulf of Mexico this time of year. We do get quite a bit of support from not only the very saturated soils, but from the widespread corn crop here in the form of evapotranspiration. Here's a frontal boundary kind of sagging across the region here early next week, and that is what I expect to bring some of the shower and storm activity. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What I want to show is that by the time we get into next week, we've got a very volatile air mass across the region again. We're bringing that hot, humid air mass back into the area, and that does mean an increase in the shower and thunderstorm activity where we've got the upper level support from the jet stream, where we've got some of these decaying outflow boundaries. The specifics will need to be worked out as we get into next week, but that's what brings the chance for showers and storms back into the Corn Belt as we talk about the week 2 time period next week. This return of this hot, humid air mass gives us the support for those thunderstorms, and then it just becomes looking for the details to be for the trigger for those storms. Sure enough, then, when we look at the European model, the precipitation forecast here, we'll go ahead and bring this back. We can start off, we'll go quickly through the first couple of days. We've hit that well. In the early details here are the showers and storms again, or the isolated showers. I would be shocked by any thunderstorm activity across Wisconsin and Illinois late in the day on Tuesday. As we get into the middle part of the week, here we go on Thursday and Friday, starting to bring those showers and storms through parts of the upper Midwest. That frontal boundary may extend here into parts of the eastern Corn Belt or the eastern Great Lakes, perhaps during the early part of the weekend, bringing some isolated showers. But really, as we talk about the eastern Corn Belt, parts of Illinois and Indiana, parts of eastern Iowa, it's as this next storm system comes through right now, forecast to move through the Dakotas during the weekend, so perhaps chances for severe weather again across the Dakotas and the upper Midwest Saturday and Sunday as the timing stands right now. But then as this begins to push off to the east, the main area of low pressure, we drag a cold front back here across parts of the eastern Corn Belt. And again, with that volatile air mass back in place, this is what we look for, the details here. We know that as we get into next week, we've got an air mass that's once again supportive of scattered showers and thunderstorms. And so we look for the details and the focal points for those. As this front kind of stalls out across the region or slowly moves through, that's where we see the early week chance for showers and storms across the eastern Corn Belt. And then as the jet stream begins to kind of flatten out, we'll have to watch for disturbances riding along the ridge of high pressure, again, tapping into some of that atmospheric instability, some of that volatile air mass for the chance for showers and storms across this region. This is an evolution that I'm sure Eric will be covering in depth as we get into our long-range forecast tomorrow morning and then the forecast that follows on Thursday morning. I'm getting out a bit beyond the scope of these regional forecast videos, but I just want to let you know this is the general evolution. Dry for the next 5 or 6 days, but we need to kind of watch what happens next week because it could be good and bad depending on where you're at. I'm kind of losing words here just because we have a lot of less certainty as we get into week 2, so I'm going to just kind of leave it at that. The total precipitation forecast from the European model right now, we'll go ahead and play this out again, just kind of showing you the details here. As we go through the next 5 days, just notice it's very dry across a big chunk of the Corn Belt. As we get into the later part of the week, again, bringing in the chance for some showers and storms across the Dakotas into the upper Midwest. They're going to be scattered in nature. Not everyone's going to see the rainfall from these mid to late week showers and storms across the Dakotas and upper Midwest. It's not going to be a regime where we see these widespread MCSs covering a lot of ground. Not until we get to next week, I think. As we go ahead, we'll play this out into early next week. This is where we see that next frontal boundary kind of making its way across parts of the eastern Corn Belt. But again, details on this one we'll just kind of hold off on just for some of our later forecasts. But just kind of showing you the pattern here. It's drier across a big chunk of the Corn Belt until at least the end of the weekend into early next week. The GFS agrees here. Look at this, drier across a big chunk of the Corn Belt. There's the upper Midwest showers and storms here late this week. And then it's not until we get into next week that we see more significant shower and storm chances returning in any large-scale fashion across the Corn Belt. High temperatures for the next 5 days. Just to wrap it up, here is this much cooler and less humid air mass here across the big chunk of the Corn Belt here. High temperatures very close to 80s, from the upper 70s to the lower 80s. Starting to warm up, though, slowly as we head through the rest of the week. Wednesday, slightly warmer, bringing this heat in much quicker across the high plains. So we get into the day on Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday. By the time we get to the end of the week, into the weekend, starting to bring a more typical late July air mass back into the region with high temperatures very close to 90 degrees for just about everybody. As always, Eric Snodgrass will have an in-depth look at the evolution of the next 1 to 2 weeks in our Thursday morning ag forecast video. You can catch our U.S. long-range forecast tomorrow morning, and then I'll be back with your next look at the Corn Belt on Friday. Have a great day.